evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on Zoom and on Facebook Live. Thank you to Sound Circle for that beautiful music. And thank you to all of you who are here tonight for making this event possible. This is an event that is a collaboration between Motus Theater and the National Justice for Our Neighbors offices. And before we continue, I want to honor that we are all probably processing a lot of pain, trauma, and emotions due to COVID-19, police brutality, the protests, racism, health and economic fears, and even the election. So let's take 3 collective deep breaths while we reflect in our mind on something we're each grateful for. Ready? Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Thank you. My name is Tania Chairez. I am an undocumented immigrant, a monologuist in Motus's UndocMonologists series, and the National Outreach and Education Director for Motus Theater. We create original theater to facilitate dialogue on critical issues of our time, and we use the power of art to build alliances across diverse segments of our community. One of Motus's strategies to strengthen our community and our country is to present allied performances where we ask people who are often in positions of public leadership in our communities to stand in the shoes of an undocumented person or a formerly incarcerated Motus monologuist and read their story aloud. The readers don't need to agree with everything they read in the story. They just need to be willing to suspend judgment, model courageous empathy, and see the world for a moment through someone else's eyes. For Motus's Welcoming the Stranger series, we are asking faith leaders to step into the shoes of an undocumented monologuist from our UndocMonologists series. And today we are incredibly honored to have leaders from Justice for Our Neighbors, including Reverend Dr. Will Reed, Reverend Mark Salvacion, Claudia Marchan, and Alba Jaramillo step into the shoes of Alejandro Fuentes-Mena, Armando Peniche, Laura Peniche, and myself. So welcome, everyone. Would you each introduce yourselves by saying just a few words about who you are? And perhaps we can start with Reverend Dr. Will Reed.
I'm Will Reed. I serve as the board chair for Justice for Our Neighbors in Houston. Been working with that organization on immigrant issues for a number of years. It's good to be here.
Hi, I'm Pastor Mark Salvacion. I am pastor at Historic St. George's United Methodist Church in Philadelphia. I'm also the executive director and managing counsel of the prospective Justice for Our Neighbors of the Delaware Valley, which serves rural immigrant communities in South Jersey, Eastern Pennsylvania, and Peninsula Delaware. And I too am very glad to be here tonight.
Hi, I'm Alba Jaramillo. I am the executive director of Arizona Justice for Our Neighbors. We're located in Tucson, Arizona. And I'm also the chair of Teatro Dignidad, which is a theater company that focuses on human rights education through theater arts. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claudia Marchan. I'm the executive director of Northern Illinois Justice for Our Neighbors, located in Chicago, Illinois. And we serve communities, immigrant communities throughout Northern Illinois. And I'm honored to be here today. Thank you.
Motus monologuists, maybe we can start with Armando Peniche.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you all for being here, and thank you for the people who are gonna read our stories. You know, it takes a lot of courage for you to step into our shoes, so thank you. Yes, I live in Denver. I work for the Denver Public Library. I'm a library program associate, so I do a lot of programming with kids, families, teens, you know, all that good stuff.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Peniche. I am a Motus Theater UndocMonologist. I live in Aurora, Colorado, and I also am part of the immigration committee with Together Colorado, a faith-based a faith-based organization in across Colorado, and I work for Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition as hotline coordinator.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alejandro Antonio Fuentes-Mena, and I am from, technically, it's hard to say where I'm from. We bought a house in Denver, Colorado, but right now we're here in San Diego, California, because I'm trying to get my master's in educational leadership. So that I can also build my own school called Radical Arts Academy of Denver, and I will be chief of programming once that is done, which will just look to marry the ideas of art and arts integrated education with the overall combination of community within the far northeast of Denver. And yeah, I'm super happy to be here, and thank you all for being here as well.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Now, I would like to welcome Motus musician Elisa Garcia, who has chosen a song to sing after each monologue that honors the monologuist and their experience. We offer this music as restorative medicine, so we hope that when she sings, you will know she is singing directly for each of you, so you can breathe, cry if you need to, and settle into your big, strong, tender hearts. This way, we can all leave this performance restored for the good work ahead. She will begin the presentation by singing Walk in My Shoes by Carlos Heredia, the Motus Shoebox Stories theme song for our allied readings.
Thank you. If you could just for a moment take a walk in my shoes, feel the weight of my burden, see the world as I do, maybe then we'll find a way to live a life where each can say, I respect who you are. Take a moment to refrain from any judgment and my pain and hold my story for a while. Si puedes por un momento caminar en mi camino, sentir el peso de mi carga y ver el mundo como yo. Así vamos a encontrar la manera de hablar y decir, yo te respeto. Toma un momento sin rencor, sin todo el juicio y el dolor. Ten mi historia por un tiempo. If you could just for a moment let me walk in your shoes, feel the weight of your burden, and live the life that you do. Neighbor, then I'll understand. Despite our difference, shake your hand, and now respect who you are. I take this moment to refrain from any judgment and my pain and hold your story for a while. If you could just for a moment take a walk in my shoes.
Thank you, Elisa.
Thank you.
While she sings after each monologue, please go ahead and share a few thoughts in the Zoom chat or in the Facebook Live comments about what most impacted you as you heard each story. And now we will begin. So please sit back and listen to Reverend Mark Salvacion as he reads aloud Armando Peniche's story from Motus's UndocumAmerica series entitled This Beautiful Dark Brown Skin.
Thank you, Tanya. And as we begin to read these monologues, and as we go through all 4 monologues, it is my hope that you all see the monologuists who wrote these powerful stories, that you all hear the words of each monologue, but also that you hear each story with your heart. I'll begin by reading This Beautiful Dark Brown Skin by Armando Peniche. Armando was 12 years old. The Armando of this monologue is 12 years old. And this monologue has so many resonant points with me. And it's a beautiful, beautiful story. Like many Latinos, I have a huge family. Unfortunately, I never get to see most of them because they are on the other side of the US border with Mexico. My family in the US, I can count on a few fingers, a few uncles, my dad, my brother, and sisters. Thankfully, I've always been fortunate to have wonderful friends who I see as my family. That's why in the 7th grade, when my dad decided to move us to a different neighborhood, I chose to remain in the same middle school, to stay with my old friends. Hanging out with my friends during lunch, sitting next to my secret crush in math class, seemed like a no-brainer, but it made for my trip to school to be a long one. I had my routine down though. Wake up at 5:30 a.m., catch the first bus at 6:15, arrive at the second bus stop at 6:45, and hope I didn't have to chase after the bus. If I made it to the corner of Kentucky and Federal by 7:15, I was good. I could take a deep breath. This meant I had time to stop at the convenience store and grab a cup of hot cocoa, maybe play a couple of arcade games before school. Talk about a warm-up. I'm winning against hordes of zombies before even starting my school day. Yep, no pop quiz was ever bigger than that. After school on nice days, I would skip the second bus and just walk. My dad would still be at work when I came home, and my sister at her after-school activities. So I was in no hurry to get to an empty house. On my walk home, I would use the concrete dividers on the sidewalk as measures and take the time to practice my music lessons for the cello. Each step I made on the sidewalk was a note. I would walk and count. 1, 2, 3, 4. For longer sections, I would count 1, 2, 3, 4. For shorter sections, 1, 2, 3, 4. I had my music teacher in my head telling me, "Come on, Armando, stay on the beat. Stay on the beat." So one day I'm happily counting along, looking down at my concrete measures when I see blue and red lights flashing across the sidewalk. And I hear an angry voice yelling at me, "Stop, freeze." I was totally confused. I might fight video game zombies, but I was just a kid, barely old enough to sit in the front seat of a car, and here are 2 police officers coming at me, hands on their guns, yelling. I was freaking out, like, what did I do wrong? My mind was going through a mess of different emotions, because as an undocumented person, the last thing you want to do, the very, very, very last thing, is to get in trouble. Even a simple traffic violation, a simple traffic stop can lead to deportation. So I'm thinking, what did I do? What could it have been? Did I forget to pay the bus driver? But no way, I remember paying David. He gave me a transfer, and he would never call the cops, even if I did forget. The officers were yelling at me to turn around and put my hands up. I was struggling to understand what was going on when the second officer physically spun me around, stuck his hands into my pockets, and started pulling everything out. My gum, the coins left from the arcade, my bus transfer, my student ID. He yanked my arms tightly behind my back and handcuffed me. I was in shock, totally confused and terrified. And then with some kind of kid logic, I thought, is it my hair? My family didn't have money for regular haircuts, so I cut my own hair, which, as you can imagine, with a 12-year-old didn't work out so well. I would always end up using the number 4 clipper to get rid of the patches. At least it was even. No, I thought, it can't be my hair. Then they searched every pocket in my backpack, dumping out my school books. They were looking for something. They couldn't find it, and that's when it hit me. They stopped me because of the color of my skin. They think I'm some criminal. I can't believe they're doing this. What if they take me to jail and my dad has to come and get me? Will he need an ID? Could they deport my dad? The officers pushed me down, grabbed my student ID, and went back to their car, leaving me on the street handcuffed. It took about 20 minutes to run my ID through some database. And while I sat on that curb, all these cars were going by, looking at me, pointing at me, like I stole something or robbed somebody. They assumed the officers were making the city safer for them, stopping a thief. I'm a kid in handcuffs sitting on the curb, and I wanted to get up and yell, "Stop! I'm the victim here. I didn't do anything. Let me go. I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything." And I can't explain to you, even now, how humiliated and ashamed I felt sitting there with everyone going by, pointing at me, looking at me, thinking I was some criminal. And finally, the officers came out of their car. They threw my stuff into my backpack and uncuffed me. One handed me my ID and said, the most ironic thing I've ever heard. He said, "Stay out of trouble." No apology, nothing. When all along I wasn't the trouble, they were. I remember it taking me a long time to pull myself together, to even figure out which way was home. But I did make it home, and like many other days, there was no one there, no one I could talk to. Instinctively, I grabbed my soccer ball and went to an elementary school a few blocks away where I often played. There was no field, but there was a baseball cage where I would sometimes practice my shots. I stayed there until evening, kicking that soccer ball over and over and over against that metal cage, taking my anger and shame on that ball until my foot couldn't take the pain any longer. I often wonder, how many other brown and black kids go through this stuff, pulled over, harassed by the police with no way to channel the fear, anger, and humiliation? How many undocumented kids go through this stuff and have no one at home to talk to? No shoulder to cry on, no soccer ball. Because we start to serve a life sentence away from our families as soon as we cross that border. I'm a man now, watching another man, our president, tell the citizens of this country that if you're an undocumented Mexican, you must be in a dangerous gang, a rapist, a murderer. Can I be safe walking home from my job at the library when more and more Americans view people who look like me as a threat? Even more importantly, is my 9-year-old son going to look like a bad guy to a couple of officers? Will my neighbors see me for who I am? A young father hurrying to pick up his son from school so that he doesn't have to walk into an empty house? Or am I their worst nightmare, like some zombie that must be stopped? And this beautiful dark skin you see that people are being taught is a threat to this country, is the rich brown tone I inherited from my grandfather. And let me tell you, my grandfather is the best person I've ever known. No matter how poor he was, he would always house and feed people. Before he turned to religion, he was so patriotic that even when the national anthem was played on the radio, he would stand up. And he loved his grandkids so much. He would wake up extra early and walk miles to a place in Mexico that gave out free milk at 5 in the morning. So despite our poverty, we had what we needed to grow strong. Across that invisible border, my grandfather is the person I've missed the most. And because I'm undocumented, I never got a chance to go back and say goodbye to him. So when you see someone with this beautiful dark brown skin walking down the street, I hope you think of my strong, kind-hearted Mexican grandfather. And I hope you will think of me. And I hope you think of my beautiful son and help me to keep him safe.
You can't buy the wind, the sun, the rain, the clouds, and the colors. You can't buy my joy, and you can't buy my pain. Tú no puedes comprar el viento, tú no puedes comprar el sol, tú no puedes comprar la lluvia, tú no puedes comprar el calor, tú no puedes comprar las nubes, tú no puedes comprar los colores, tú no puedes comprar mi alegría. Tú no puedes comprar mis dolores, tú no puedes comprar el viento, tú no puedes comprar el sol, tú no puedes comprar la lluvia, tú no puedes comprar el calor, tú no puedes comprar las nubes, tú no puedes comprar los colores. Tú no puedes comprar mi alegría, tú no puedes comprar mis dolores. Gracias a la vida, gracias a la vida, gracias a la vida, gracias a la vida.
Thank you, Elisa and Pastor Mark. And now the second story from Motus's UndocumAmerica series. Remember that when Elisa Garcia sings her musical response to the monologue, please share a few thoughts in the Zoom chat or in the Facebook Live comments about what most impacted you as you heard the story. And now, Laura Peniche's story, Wandering in the Desert, read by Reverend Dr. Will Reed.
I need to talk to my fellow Christians, my brothers, my sisters. I know immigration is not a topic that is comfortable, but we need to have this conversation because you may not know I'm in pain right now, and that you might have, perhaps without realizing it, contributed to my pain. I share my heart knowing that you are good people. I've seen you help out at church and the shelter and care for the elderly. I've seen you bring food to the homes of people in need. And I know that most of you don't really mean for all immigrants to be deported. So I don't understand why so many of you support leaders who are promising to deport my mom and dad. Many of my brothers and sisters of faith tell me I don't have to worry because they will be there to support me, and that they would never let anybody take me personally. But those same people are helping to elect leaders who have the intention of separating parents from their children, deporting millions of immigrants who are just trying to support their families. We often get disappointed by our politicians because they don't fulfill their promises. In this case, I know many Christians are actually counting on our elected officials not delivering on promises to deport all undocumented immigrants. But these hopes are not enough for me right now. When I'm being told that I should fill out an emergency plan for my children's school so that they know who to call if ICE picks me up. The thought of this possibility is forcing me and my children to live with so much anxiety. I really don't think that you want my children taken into foster care, left up for grabs to a destiny without a mother. There's a teaching in the New Testament about a woman who was about to be killed by a mob because of her sins. But despite her transgressions, Jesus stood up for her. He challenged those who had never committed a sin to throw the first stone. And there was no person able to throw a stone at the woman. Of course, many Christians feel my family and I made a mistake by coming here undocumented. But if you knew me, if you know me, you know we didn't come here to cause harm, but simply to preserve our own lives. We were hungry and we needed bread. We were thirsty and we needed water. We were persecuted and we chose life and freedom. I want you to know from what I've seen in my community, most people who are undocumented cross the border like my family, just trying to survive. We would have chosen a safe and legal path without wandering in the desert, without the freezing nights, without the cactus and thorns digging into our feet, without the threats of robbers and smugglers, without carrying tired little children for miles and miles. if there would have been another way. I also know from my personal experience crossing the border that my family and I were not alone. We were held by God's hand into this country. And when I see the beautiful faces of my healthy, happy children, I know I was meant to be here. And I am so grateful to be a part of my community and our country. I'm speaking now because I can no longer sit in silence with you at the church or in my faith while watching my friends and family get deported back across the desert we risked everything to cross. Called harmful names, told that we can live in the shadows and pick the fruit, but we cannot eat the fruit. Told that because we were born in another country, even if we were raised here, that we cannot sit at the table together with other Americans. And told that this country will not accept us, no matter how hard we work, no matter how much we give. There are too many families suffering and being separated. Too many refugees in this country that are being sent back to their deaths. There are too many of us devastated by the pressing circumstances around us, like watching the little children in cages exposed to abuse, the tear gas in the eyes of mothers and fathers, the realization that at any moment our beautiful life as we know it could be over. I find guidance in the teaching of Jesus and in the way he stood up in front of the mob to save a life. I pray my fellow Christians will stand with me against cruel immigration policies and help me save the lives of my family, my friends, and many other parents who are just trying to provide for their children. If you believe in Jesus, you know that Jesus loves you. So when you think of my children, my family, and the undocumented immigrants in this country, please remember his commandment to love one another the way he loves us. Everyone makes mistakes. I have, you have, and I believe our leaders have too. But we can learn from our mistakes and stand together in God's love.
Love is but a song we sing, and fear's the way we die. You can make the mountains ring, or make the angels cry. Though the bird is on the wing, and you may not know why. Come on, people now, smile on your brother. Everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Some may come and some may go, we will surely pass. When the one that's left us here returns for us at last,
people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. If you hear the song I sing, you will understand. Just listen. You hold the key to love and fear, all in your trembling hand. Just one key unlocks them both. It's there at your command. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. Try to love one another right now. Try to love one another right now.
Thank you, Elisa. And thank you, Pastor Will. And now, Alejandro Fuentes-Mena's story, Deport Me, read by Alba Jaramillo.
I was just a kid when I realized what being undocumented meant. At age 8, I started going to work with my dad so I can help him rebuild the entire outside of other people's home, all the while not having a real home of our own. I would help my dad research what to charge and work out all the math. For example, I would discover that for one given job, contractors would charge $20,000. But my dad had been screwed over so many times that he would only charge $15,000. Clients would see his strength in Spanish, his lack of English and documented status, and give him about $10,000. And that is who my father believed he was. Half the man I thought he was, half the value of another. I witnessed as my mother would leave for an entire weekend, 72 hours, to take care of someone else's family. She was lured with the promise of being paid over $300 for the weekend, but she would come back with only $100 in her pocket. $100 that she saw as a blessing. $100 that I saw as an attack on my family. All those rich families saw little value in everything my mom did. They would take her away only to use her and spit her out. The money they paid her was barely enough for food on the table. It didn't cover the worry my mom had because she couldn't be home to take care of us when we were sick, help us with homework, comfort us when we returned to an empty house. $100 for a whole weekend away from her family, like she was worthless. But don't you understand? She was priceless to me. Well, spending my weekends without my mom as she cared for other people's children, and spending those weekends working for my dad for free so he wouldn't lose money for the privilege of building a home for someone else's family, and witnessing this over and over and over again, I began to think that I wasn't worth much either. Despite the fact that I had been recognized at school as gifted and talented, despite the fact that I was a math whiz and learned English, a completely unknown language, in less than a year, and that I was an engaged student, despite the fact that I was a precocious worship leader at my church. I let those feelings, those weekends of feelings worthless, affect me. I began making jokes rather than making plans for my future. Playing games rather than paying attention, chasing girls rather than chasing my dreams. And like all self-fulfilling prophecies, I got to the point where my grades reflected what society said my parents and I were worth: half-priced human beings. But luckily, I had a teacher named Ms. Kovacic who worked hard to remind me of my value and help convince me that what this society was telling me and my family was wrong. With her support and that of many others, I got myself out of that pit of self-depreciation, past the insecurities, past the hate, past the negativity, past that half version of me, into a good college and into a position where I am now an educator who teaches math. And like my mentors, I teach young children their value, because all children are valuable, just as you and I are valuable. As a teacher, I can't help myself. Let me take you to school for a few moments. Hope you're good with that. Let's start off with a little math lesson. My father is one man, one of the hardest workers I know. My mother is one woman, one of the strongest and most compassionate individuals in my life. My sister is one daughter, a brat, but a lovable one, and an American citizen. I'm one son, half of this country and half of Chile. And we are 4 whole, beautiful gifts, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Not the half-price individuals that society has attempted to make us. Moving to applied math and economics. If this country continues to deport the undocumented community, it is missing out on courageous, strong, intelligent, family-loving, hardworking people of great value. And that is not only our loss, it is your loss to miss out on us. Not to mention the billions in taxes we bring in every year, which is billions more than the large corporations are paying. Lastly, moving beyond math to ethics. Paying an undocumented person half the value for their life's work. Extracting all you can get to build your homes and take care of your families, and then deporting them as if they had not brought value. It's not just mathematically flawed. It is also an American math story problem gone wrong. It is criminal to treat us as subservient and less desirable. I'm living in this country undocumented, teaching your children, supporting them, engaging their minds in math and in their dreams. I'm 100% here and 100% committed to this country in which I was raised, this country that constantly seeks to spit me out. Lose me, and you lose my value. Not just the money I pay in taxes and the money I pay into Social Security that I will never benefit from, but you lose my ability to inspire, connect, engage. You lose my ability to bring an impact and you lose the knowledge I bring to my students who are your children. This country would be foolish to lose me. Deport me. But at the end, it's your loss.
I want to dedicate this musical response to the young people that are listening in tonight, and particularly to Catalina, Leonardo, Athena, to Camila, and also to Jimena and Enrique. When the night has come and the land is dark y la luna es la luz que brilla ante mí, no, I won't be afraid, no, I won't be afraid, just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Junto a mí, junto a mí. Y aunque las montañas y el cielo caigan, no voy a preocuparme, porque sé que tú estás junto a mí. I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me, oh, stand by me. Stand by me, stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Oh, stand by me. Stand by me, junto a mí. Stand by me, stand by me.
Thank you, Elisa and Alba. And now, Claudia Marchan will read my autobiographical monologue entitled Listen to Your Heart.
I often hear that the only way to get people to care about my struggles as an undocumented woman is to ask them to imagine me as their daughter or sister. But I have my own family, and my mere humanity deserves respect. I was taught in school in this country that my contributions to society are all that should matter. So I have done everything in my power to be at the top of my class, get into a good college, volunteer, work hard, and pay taxes to prove that I am worthy. And I am worthy, with or without all that effort, even though I often get treated quite literally like an alien or criminal, simply because I don't have an official document calling me a citizen. I also want you to know that I am proud of my Mexican identity. Although it took me almost 2 decades for me to embrace, from ages 5 to 18, I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, a place where an anti-immigrant sheriff called Joe Arpaio ruled. He put undocumented Mexican immigrants in chain gang shackles, making the men wear pink underwear to humiliate them. He literally celebrated spending less money on his inmates than on his dog. And somehow this was acceptable. I grew up constantly striving to prove that I wasn't dirty, lazy, criminal, or shameful. that I wasn't worth less than a dog. I now finally have a sense of my own value. So to feel my life under attack and have most people do nothing in response is as if my mere humanity doesn't matter, and that baffles me. It is inconceivable that the very ground under my feet is falling away and I could be deported, put into a detention center, separated from my family, lose my job, my mortgage, and all I've built. And yet somehow you, my friends, neighbors, the people at the coffee shop, the grocery store, and you listening to my story right now might not see my situation as urgent enough to get up and do something about it. My entire community of documented and undocumented people is under attack everywhere, left and right, day after day. And it seems most people think they've done their job by simply liking my article on Facebook, sad crying face, maybe even angry face. People think they've done enough by staying caught up on the news so that they have something to lament at the dinner table. My life is not a talking point. My life is not something to uplift a liberal agenda. And don't you dare pity me or send me prayers. Do something. Call your senator or your immigrant phobic family. Show up in an immigrant rights meeting, because every day of inaction is another day the status quo prevails. And the status quo is painful, even if I still have my family intact, because it hurts physically, emotionally, and mentally. That most citizens don't care enough to give their time and effort to help me and their fellow human beings. Because while you are going about business as usual, trying to keep up with work deadlines, health goals, and reflecting on your next gratitude post, those of us on the front lines of anti-immigrant attacks are fighting against the limited hours in a day. Because there's never enough time to work our 60-hour-a-week jobs and then go to meeting after meeting, plan events, protests, fundraisers, and teach-ins, pouring our energy from what quickly becomes an empty cup. But somehow, at the same time, it's still the job of the undocumented community to educate citizens on how our life depends on your voice, your vote, your money, and your willingness to show up. It's not like we enjoy the fact that we need you, but we do. And I'm exhausted from pulling their weight. My mental health is suffering, and I need rest too. But right now, I'm afraid that if I don't go to that extra meeting, if I don't share that petition, if I don't convince everyone that this is urgent, then more people will get deported, sometimes sent to their death, and another family will be torn apart. You see, it's urgent for us all the time. And someplace deep inside, you must know it's urgent too. You must. So please, just for a moment, pause. Breathe. Can you see me? I am afraid. Afraid that in the end, no matter how much I fought for others, I won't be able to save my own family from deportation. Have you seen the pictures from our borders? Innocent families with young children and elders tear gassed for seeking refuge. Do you know what is happening across our country? Hardworking immigrants, good parents like mine, locked away like criminals in detention centers. Young children separated from their parents in these terrible tent camps are exposed to abuse and dying from dehydration and untreated infections. Do you see a war? Do you see at least a semblance to concentration camps? Can you feel your own heart telling you it's urgent? Please listen to your heart, not just for me or for the undocumented community, but for your own humanity too. Please, it's urgent.
Solo le pido a Dios, I only ask God that I'm not indifferent to pain, to justice, and to the future. Solo le pido a Dios que el dolor no me sea indiferente, que la resaca muerte no me encuentre vacía y sola sin haber hecho lo suficiente, que la resaca muerte no me encuentre vacía y sola sin haber hecho lo suficiente. Solo le pido a Dios que lo injusto no me sea diferente, que no me abofeten la otra mejilla después que una garra me arañó esta suerte. Solo le pido a Dios que el futuro no me sea indiferente. Desahuciado está el que tiene que marchar a vivir una cultura diferente. Y es un monstruo grande y pisa fuerte toda la pobre inocencia de la gente.
Thank you, Elisa and Claudia.
Thank you.
And really all of our readers and monologists. So to our 4 readers, I want to start with you. Can you share with us, and whoever wants to pop in first, what most impacted you about reading our stories aloud today?
I'd like to start. The story of Armando and the stories that were read by the other monologists are not just their stories, they're our stories. And certainly my father and my mother immigrated to this country in 1951. And when my father's student visa ran out, he became undocumented as well. And in 1962, 2 years before I was born, his church community, his local community, people in his town gathered around my family, supported my family, and lifted them up through letters to the editor, through bake sales, through events. And ultimately, my father was a beneficiary of a private bill issued by our congressman to have him become naturalized as a citizen. But I fear that today, in this climate and in this day and age, we no longer have that same unity of support for immigrants and especially for undocumented persons. My father would go on to practice medicine in our small town in New Jersey for the next 40 years. And it was that contribution that was the payback for his being able to allowed to stay in this country and contribute. And I just find the courage of each of these 4 undocumented young persons to be so great. And that courage is something that is admirable to all of us. Thank you.
For me, reading Tania's story was extra special because I also am a person who has DACA. So I found many parallels, which is why I think I get a little extra emotional when I read it, because, you know, Tania's story is my story, is the story of many of our documented youth, right? And even, you know, all of our undocumented youth and undocumented families. We can all find, you know, some kind of parallel, right? I found many other parallels in Laura's story and, you know, my mom's story of coming over. And, you know, had flashbacks to, you know, when my dad was, you know, in a detention center 2 years ago. So these stories really, you know, touch me in all those many ways. And I know that as you sit there hearing them, right, you can think about, you know, your clients, your family members. And this is why we have to tell these stories, why we have to continue the fight, right? Why we have to continue to advocate. So that to me was the most, you know, powerful thing, is that we tell these stories and that we, you know, we let others hear them.
This is Will, as I just got back from walked in from a flight from Phoenix to Houston's Hobby Airport this evening, and I reviewed my notes to read Laura's story as I was flying back from Phoenix to here, and I was sitting on the right side of the plane, and I could look out and see the vastness of the desert, the vastness of nothing down there that was life-giving, or very little life-giving, and I thought of how difficult it must be to make that journey, and what a place of privilege I have as a white male who was born in this country, it just broke my heart to read Laura's story, but also to do it, prepare for this time tonight, as I flew 30,000 feet above the border, and it's just hard to imagine the decisions that families have to make to leave the pain and agony of their own country to come here and then receive pain and agony when they get here as well. So yeah, it was difficult.
I think for me, first, Alejandro, I am just so honored, so honored to be able to read your story. It spoke to me on so many levels. Like you, I grew up undocumented too, and my father, who is a welder, constantly, never to this day, still doesn't get paid what he's worth, and he's such a talented welder. And so when you were speaking about your parents, I immediately related to that, and just made me just reflect so much on the exploitation of the labor of our undocumented community, and how vulnerable we are to that. And it breaks my heart, because our community is yet, despite the fact that they're so underpaid, so grateful even for the little bit that they get. And I don't want to end the gratitude, but I sense that urgency in your monologue, that no, they shouldn't just accept that. We need to pay them their worth. And at the same time, I also recognize this is not the fault of undocumented people. It is not their fault that they're getting, accepting that this money, or that they're even grateful for it. The blame is in our mainstream community that constantly underpays us. And so it just really made me think about that. And then I just want to say that, the impact that it had on me personally, reading your monologue, was, despite everything you have been through, nowhere in your monologue do you come across as a victim. You come across as a person of power, of resilience, of social change. And I'm just so proud of everything you're doing for these youth, and just so proud to have you in this country. So thank you for that.
Thank you all so much for sharing how this impacted you. And now I want to turn to the monologuist. Can you tell us what impacted you about having your story read aloud today?
I can go first. So it was, I think with the elections coming up and everything that the immigrant community has had to endure over the last 4 years, today was very emotional. It was a very emotional performance, and Pastor Mark did a wonderful job of stepping in my shoes and sharing that story. And just for the little talk that we had, I found out that he has a lot of things in common with me. And all of the other readers gave a wonderful reading of each monologue story. And it brought a sense of energy to me because like I can't wait for all this to pass so we can start the healing process. Like I hate how divided we've come to the point where, if we disagree on something, we just dig our heels and there's no solutions that come about. So it was just beautiful to hear the stories again, and a reminder that there are good people in the world, and we shouldn't be judged by the bad apples of the immigrant community. Like we are each our own individual. And I thank all the participants that are here hearing our stories, and hopefully you take our stories and you're able to share them with other people, and we can get to that place where we could have a nation where we're all together. So thank you for that, and also thank you for the beautiful singing. It was very touching.
I can speak next, since I am Armando's sister. And well, first of all, I always get impacted by Armando's story because as his sister, I'm sorry to hear that I wasn't there for him after school. And I'm sorry, Armando. But it also reminds me of the sacrifice that our parents make, not just by bringing us here to this country, but also by working hard and taking extra jobs so they can support our home and our family, which resonated as well from Alejandro's story, which as a mother myself, I know how hard it is to leave your children so you can go to work, and then your work is not fully valued. And I just so appreciate Motus Theater for giving us this platform. And we don't talk too much about the process, but all of us who wrote monologues, we went through this beautiful process of getting together and telling each other stories. And this is how we crafted our monologues. And so it's been just an honor to be with all these wonderful human beings in the same room, and we get to cry together, we get to laugh together, but we also get to imagine together what type of life we imagine for ourselves, a life that we deserve. And so I just want to thank as well our readers, because we carry so much in our lives. And I felt for a moment some rest while I heard Reverend Will read my story. I felt rest because someone else was carrying my torch. And so I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone's comments as well here. We've been seeing the comments and they're very uplifting. So thank you everyone for this opportunity.
For me, whenever Alba, thank you so much for reading my story. I think the thing that I valued about your reading was that I felt that it was just as personal to you as it is to me. And I think as I'm hearing all of these stories again, each time something else is a trigger for a lot of the trauma that we underwent as children growing up and that we continue to undergo even now as adults. But what I appreciate about this platform is that you also feel the support of individuals who are willing to back you up. And even if it just means taking the small step of like being willing to be in our shoes, that's just step one. And I know that the actions will go far beyond this, because I know that stories, like a lot of people have been saying in the chat, have an impact and have the potential to change and breed hope, because that hope comes from literal and tangible actions. And so I appreciate the words, the way that you were willing to nurture my story and let it be a part of you. So thank you.
And of course, I also want to say so much thank you to Claudia for reading my story. I'm still sort of on the edge of tears right now. You can kind of hear it in my voice. And it's just amazing to have other people step into our shoes. And I really want to echo what Armando said about the election is coming up, and it's very much a source of anxiety for those of us who are sort of, waiting in limbo because so much of our lives is dependent upon policies and politicians and who's in charge and how they deem our worthiness of being in this country. But as you can hear in my monologue, like, we all know we are worthy. We all know we're powerful. And it's amazing to be able to share that with everyone and have that also come out of the mouth of another documented person, because then I feel like my journey to feel power is now your journey. And that's super amazing. So thank you for that. And thank you all for reading our stories and for this amazing space to connect. I do wish that I could read some of the amazing reactions of the things y'all shared in the chat. But, I can sort of give quick highlights. I know that after Armando's story, there were a lot of comments about imagining ourselves or even our children as 12-year-olds experiencing such a traumatic experience and the real awe of that. And after Laura's, people in the chat saying how she really embodied her faith and challenges us to do the same. And after Alejandro's, definitely highlighting the power of using this language of math to highlight our invaluable contributions. And after mine, I did read about this realization that this is a fight for our collective liberation, and how incredible to be able to come to that all together. I do want to open it up for questions, and I will start with a question for our readers. While they respond, you can submit your own questions into the Q&A function on Zoom or through Facebook Live comments. But to our ministers and leaders from our Justice for Our Neighbors, how do you hold these stories and the challenges facing individuals who are undocumented theologically as ministers or politically as leaders in your states?
That is a tough question. But all of these individual stories and the stories that I have become aware of personally because of people that I've met along life's journey motivate me to continue to work as a board member with our Justice for Our Neighbors Houston group, just to know that perhaps by working together, we can help the folks that come across our path along the in our Houston office. And and make a difference in the lives of those few folks that we can serve. And that also perhaps by telling these stories and sharing stories, maybe we can change some hearts. I'm continue to be amazed at the things I hear people say about people who are undocumented, whose names I know, people that I know by name, and it just breaks my heart, some of the things that I hear people say. So I think we need to continue to tell stories. There are stories that I have experienced with people that I know that I share from time to time with people who people in places of power, people in places of leadership, because I think it's important to put names and faces on policy decisions that people are making, and names and faces on the way that people choose to vote, and all of that.
I'd like to dovetail on something that Pastor Will said about JFON being an agent of change. I'm so thankful and so grateful that JFON and Motus joined together for this really important event. It's really important to tell these stories, but once you start doing the work of JFON, you realize that these stories are magnified hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of times across the country, and that we as JFON and as JFON affiliates are just putting our finger into the hole in the dam. I am so glad that JFON is a network that is together, 18 or 19 affiliates across the country working together, doing this work in the most important places. And I'm also so grateful that JFON is an organization that is affiliated with the United Methodist Church. And you can say all you want about the United Methodist Church, but one thing that is true is the commitment to fair immigration, the commitment to justice for undocumented persons, and the commitment to welcome the stranger in all contexts. So as a pastor and as an immigration lawyer handling these types of cases, I'm just so thankful that there is an organization like JFON that can do something like this and change hearts and minds at the same time.
I think that for me, for us in Northern Illinois JFON, we hold these stories very powerfully. It's part of our mission to build cross-cultural community, right? And our clinics are held in communities that are very, diverse communities, immigrant communities, non-immigrant communities. And it's part of our mission to bring these two communities together and, have them break bread with each other, right? Get to know each other, share each other's stories, right? Like Tania says, not as talking points, not as, to have something to talk about at the dinner table, but to really get to know each other, right? The humanity of each of our stories. And with that, when you touch someone's heart with your story, when you've told them what journey you've gone through, right? To have what you have and to be safe with your family, that's when you really get to someone's heart, right? It's not about presenting, the statistics. It's not about, creating pity. It's about creating that powerful narrative, right? That we all need to hear. And I think that that's what ultimately, like has been said, changes hearts and minds, is that the humanity of those stories and the way that we share them, right? With so much passion, as we hear our clients' stories, right? We start out by helping them, with asylum or a U visa or VAWA, and then have had the opportunity to see them through citizenship, right? And how beautiful that is, right? And how, but those 8 years to get there, or their 6, 7, 8 years to get there, you know, that path, that story needs to be told, right? Because it's not easy. And so I think that that's what, you know, so this was a wonderful opportunity. And I also thank, you know, everyone for, you know, Tania for letting me share her story, and Motus and National JFON for putting this together.
I think for all of us that work in immigrants' rights, I think that is what keeps us going, particularly in this political environment. It is the stories of our undocumented community that fuel us to keep working in something that can be so challenging. But I also, aside from the legal work in this very powerful, influential network that we have within the JFON network, I also want to comment that there is space for people's stories in the arts, and that in the theater itself is such a powerful tool to open up to educate. So I want to just, you know, mention that this forum, this space that is being created, that is a theater forum, is so effective. And so that is how, when we hold these stories, when we hold them close to our hearts, we can then reimagine ways in which we are doing advocacy. And something like theater, all of the arts are such powerful tools for social change, as I'm sure that everyone participating in this forum will agree.
Thank you all so much. And I'm going to ask some of the questions that I see in the Q&A function. But as I do, I also want to say that many of you, although you've already been engaging with the immigration system with the legal clinics, might be interested in seeing some more information and facts about how immigrants are sort of doing in the age of COVID-19 and how you can be agents of change within it. So in the chat, you will actually see a link to facts about undocumented people and how we are sort of in this fight with you against the pandemic, as well as some action items and how you can share these stories. And while you see that in the chat, I want to go ahead and ask one of the first questions in here. It says, you know, really just tell me how I can help. And perhaps different people have different situations, right? I think the person who asked this question says they are not employed, yet they feel the pain of the brothers and sisters who are struggling. So what can they do? Whoever wants to take it.
I feel like you or Laura should take that.
Want to go, Laura?
I can go first. We have to do everything in our power to elect leaders who can respect human dignity. And that starts at the local level with our representatives, legislators, our sheriffs who hold so much power, as well as our next president. Another thing that I can add is there are movements in potentially every local community that you can think of fighting and resisting deportations. I see many families every day getting separated through my work, getting separated by ICE, and it is heartbreaking to be fighting against an oppressive system that is like a machine. And despite the pandemic, they're still working at the regular capacity, putting more people in detention where COVID is in there in the detention centers. And so please get involved in your local communities. If you are here in Colorado, there are many wonderful organizations, including the Colorado Rapid Response Network, which will respond to raids. And then we also document ICE incidents so that we can see how ICE is operating in our state, and we can have efforts at the legislature to address the needs of our community.
Thanks, Laura. I think you said all of the beautiful things. I mean, I just want to reiterate to everyone that as we all know, hearing the stories and being impacted by the stories is just step number one, right? From there, you have to really go out of your way to make sure others are hearing our stories and holding us close, which is really so critical right now, particularly as we're facing this really intense election season. So please, please vote, take people to the polls to vote, give pizza to the people at polls as they're voting. I don't know, all of the things, because it is particularly important, and many of us can't do that. So definitely all of the things Laura said. Also the action sheet that is linked into the chat does have a national action item from El Colectivo de Santuario, which is a sanctuary collective that is to sign a petition asking that if Biden were to become president, he would release everyone. He would allow everyone in sanctuary to stay. So there is an action item in there, and there are many organizations in each of your states, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Texas, Arizona, doing amazing work. So definitely look into that for sure. There's a second question in the chat that says, what is the possibility that the DREAM Act will pass? And is this still something that most Americans want to happen? And as someone answers, I would also maybe broaden the question to say, are there policies that we should be looking out for? Or yeah, anything nationally that people should get behind?
I think that we've seen, just with the DREAM Act, I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to, I think as we see the outcome of the elections, right, there's a lot of policies that have to be, undone first. There's been so much damage, right, in the last few years that there is a lot of urgency to undo all of that. I mean, the DREAM Act, I think, as someone mentioned in the chat, right, Senator Durbin. I mean, there's a lot of our, local, Senate and legislative officials that have moved this. So it's definitely something, that continues and needs to be moved, as well as, even far beyond that, right? How do we bring back and also take care of our, parents of dreamers, with DAPA, and all of that, and how do we bring up, right, immigration reform? We have politicians that are promising, right, immigration reform. So let's keep an eye on all the things that have been done to asylum, right? The injustices against asylum, the injustices against DACA, TPS, all of that, and not lose the accountability, right, of the politicians that are telling us this is what we're going to do, right? Because it's very easy to do that, especially since we have to undo so much harm. But definitely, DREAM Act is, I mean, this is something that we can see in polls right away, where DREAM Act is something that most Americans are for and do want, right? And even beyond that, right, to take care of parents. So yes, this is something that we should definitely follow up on and hold our, legislative officials and president accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know we're at the end of our time, so if you must leave us at this moment, I completely understand. However, I do see one question in the Q&A function that I think would be really great to answer before we head out on our evening. And that question is, in your experience, what barrier is more difficult to penetrate in this dominant culture in the US through your stories and narratives, the nationalistic sentiment or the legalistic self-righteousness embodied in privilege? Which is a big question again. Yeah, I saw all of your faces go, ooh. Again, the question is, what barrier is more difficult to penetrate, the nationalistic sentiment or the legalistic self-righteousness?
What comes directly out of my head is like, aren't they intertwined? Like the way that society has shaped up to be has led to these laws that end up being so racist, sexist, misogynistic in every sense of the word. And when we are thinking about which one needs to change first, I've had different arguments, and like even right now, as I'm thinking with my educational mindset, people say that you need to build the structures so that society can thrive or you can get to your overall outcome, right? And so if we want the mentalities of individuals to change, then we need to create systems that will allow for those mentalities to change. So in my mind, laws need to change for that to happen. But then how are you going to get people to vote on it unless they have the mindset? So it's kind of like that. What came first, the chicken or the egg? They both need to change, and they need to change as soon as possible, is my answer.
Thank you. Well, oh, no, go ahead. I saw someone trying to speak.
Thank you, Tania. I just wanted to add that something that's been very challenging is to see efforts for such as the DREAM Act, which are an amazing answer to our issues, but it is hard when something like the DREAM Act or any other law that is proposed to fix the immigration system, it often leaves out our parents. And it puts us in this difficult position of fighting for something that will eventually put my dad at further risk, because thanks to this legislation, now we have to give more money to ICE, and we have to secure the border and put more ICE boots on the ground. So I think it's very important to challenge that narrative that only the youth are deserving of this country, because our parents have sacrificed so much. Another challenge that I see in the narrative is when we hear of when we hear from anyone in this country saying, yes, we need to deport the criminals or people who have DUIs. And this is very hard to hear, because anyone can make a mistake, anyone can make a wrong turn at any point of their life, but also anyone can have a path to redemption. And it's very important that we value all human beings and we see them all as our siblings in this world. And so I think that I just want to ask you all to please keep that in mind as you move forward and you are doing your work and making your asks. Please remember that we are all deserving children of God who deserve human dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone, for those of you who submitted your questions, for our readers and monologuists who shared your insights and were willing to be vulnerable with your answers. So on behalf of Motus Theater, so many thanks to our Motus monologuists, Alejandro Fuentes-Mena, Armando Peniche, Laura Peniche, our readers who stood in our shoes, Reverend Dr. Will Reed, Reverend Mark Salvacion, Claudia Marchan, and Alba Jaramillo, and Motus's powerful contributing artists, including Motus Theater's artistic director, Kirsten Wilson, and singer Elisa Garcia. In the chat, you can find the opportunity to donate to Motus Theater. We cannot do the work with people on the front lines of violence with everyone and create monologues or do presentations like this without your support. So thank you in advance. And if you were moved by our stories, I hope you will definitely share the video of this event with others. We will send you a link to this performance in just a few days. Right now, I would say that the most important way to combat anti-immigrant rhetoric is to uplift the stories of immigrants. And of course, please review the fact sheet and visit our website so you can find out how to further share these stories, as well as to find more information about our podcasts that feature our stories. So in our Shoebox Stories and DocuAmerica podcast, prominent Americans like actor John Lithgow, police chief Art Acevedo, feminist icon Gloria Steinem, and many others read the stories of Motus UndocMonologists. So this is it for us today. That is goodbye. We appreciate you spending your evening with us and expressing civic hospitality by listening deeply to the experience of an undocumented person. With heart and gratitude, have a great rest of your evenings tonight.